From ruling the airwaves with hits like Heart of Glass to influencing everyone from Lady Gaga to Billie Eilish, Debbie Harry was unstoppable until she wasn't. The early days of Blondie. In the mid-1970s, New York City was alive with rebellion. Punk rock was emerging from the smoky corners of downtown venues, and the grungy chaos of CBGB became the heartbeat of this underground movement. Among the scrappy bands clawing for attention stood Debbie Harry, a striking, platinum-haired singer whose cool detachment masked an electrifying stage presence. At 30, she wasn't the fresh-faced teenager typically associated with breakout rock acts, but her age and lived experiences gave her an edge that set her apart. Debbie wasn't born into fame or privilege. She grew up in suburban New Jersey after being adopted as an infant. After college, she bounced between odd jobs, including a stint as a waitress and a Playboy bunny. But Debbie always gravitated toward the arts. Her early ventures into music, including singing for a folk rock band called Wind in the Willows, hinted at her artistic potential, but success eluded her. That changed in 1973 when she met Chris Stein, a guitarist whose gritty style matched her vision. Together, they set out to create something entirely new, melding punk's raw energy with the melodic hooks of pop. By 1974, their band Blondie was born. Their early performances at CBGB were a mix of chaos and charisma. Blondie wasn't polished, and the audiences weren't forgiving. Debbie later quipped that their reception ranged from passionate adoration to literal bottle throwing. Despite the rough start, the band's unique style began to turn heads. Tracks like Ex-Offender, originally titled Sex Offender, pushed boundaries with its provocative themes, while Rip Her to Shreds showcased Debbie's biting wit and vocal prowess. The songs hinted at Blondie's ability to transcend punk's limitations without losing its edge. In 1976, they caught their first break, signing with Private Stock Records. Their self-titled debut album introduced Blondie to a wider audience, but it wasn't an overnight success. However, In the Flesh found unexpected success in Australia, giving the band their first taste of international recognition. It wasn't massive, but it was enough to prove they were on the right track. Breakthrough with Parallel Lines. In 1978, Blondie's steady rise exploded into mainstream fame with Parallel Lines. The album marked a major shift, steering away from their punk roots into a polished, genre-blending masterpiece. Mike Chapman, a producer known for demanding perfection, drove this transformation. The recording process wasn't smooth. Chapman's exacting style clashed with the band's looser approach, but the tension resulted in their most iconic work. Heart of Glass was the album's centerpiece. Originally a playful disco-inspired tune, it had lingered in Blondie's repertoire for years. Chapman's production elevated it into something bold and boundary-pushing. The track's sleek disco beat mixed with punk attitude defied expectations and polarized listeners. Purists cried betrayal, but fans couldn't get enough. It soared to #1 in the US and UK, selling millions worldwide. Other tracks kept the momentum going. One Way or Another, with its razor-sharp lyrics about Debbie's real-life encounter with a stalker, exuded gritty energy. The snarling vocals paired with an unforgettable guitar riff turned it into an anthem of defiance. Hanging on the Telephone, a cover of a lesser-known rock song, brought Blondie's knack for reinvention to the forefront. Every track offered something fresh, cementing the album as more than just a disco experiment. Critics quickly recognized Parallel Lines as a cultural turning point. It demolished the boundaries separating punk and pop, appealing to underground fans while dominating radio charts. The album's success wasn't limited to sales. Its influence reshaped music trends, making way for genre-fluid experimentation. The visuals were just as groundbreaking. The album's cover, with Debbie front and center, was striking in its simplicity. Her platinum blonde hair and bold stare became instantly recognizable. Offstage, she was a fixture in New York's nightlife, often spotted at Studio 54. Designers like Steven Sprouse and Thierry Mugler saw her as more than a musician. Debbie's ability to mix thrift store punk with high fashion made her a style icon. Behind the scenes, the band felt the weight of success. Long hours in the studio and relentless touring started to wear them down. Chris Stein would later point to this period as the start of cracks forming in their dynamic. Domination and genre experimentation. Between 1979 and 1981, Blondie stood out as the ultimate shapeshifter in music. Their ability to move seamlessly across genres, punk, pop, reggae, disco, funk, and even hip-hop, set them apart from any other band of the era. No one was as fearless in blending sounds, and no frontwoman captivated audiences like Debbie Harry. She didn't just lead Blondie, she helped define pop culture. Their 1979 album Eat to the Beat was a testament to their adventurous spirit. Building on the massive success of Parallel Lines, the band leaned into pop accessibility without losing the punk energy that had launched them. Tracks like Dreaming, driven by Clem Burke's frenetic drumming and Debbie's soaring vocals, became instant favorites. Union City Blue brought a softer, emotional depth inspired by Debbie's acting experience in Union City. The band's willingness to evolve didn't stop at sound. Eat to the Beat became the first album with a music video for every track, an ambitious move that foreshadowed the music video revolution ushered in by MTV a few years later. Blondie wasn't just making music, they were shaping the future of how it would be experienced. The experimentation continued in 1980 with Auto-American. The album opened with Europa, an atmospheric instrumental featuring a spoken-word narration by Debbie that set a dramatic tone. From there, Blondie shattered expectations with every track. The Tide is High, a cover of the Paragons' reggae hit, showcased their ability to adapt and innovate. Its lush arrangement and Debbie's sultry vocals gave the genre a polished pop twist. Then there was Call Me. Written for the American Gigolo soundtrack in collaboration with Giorgio Moroder, the track fused Blondie's energy with Moroder's electronic disco style. It became their biggest hit, staying at #1 on the Billboard charts for 6 weeks and cementing their global dominance. Rapture, released in 1981, took their boundary pushing further. The song blended funk, jazz, and hip-hop, with Debbie delivering one of the first rap verses ever heard in a chart-topping song. Referencing Fab Five Freddy and Grandmaster Flash, it was a tribute to the burgeoning hip-hop scene. Rapture hit #1 in the US, a testament to Blondie's ability to stay ahead of the curve. While their music broke barriers, Debbie's cultural presence soared. She became a fixture at Studio 54 and a muse for Andy Warhol, appearing in his artwork. Her style, mixing thrift store finds with designer pieces, cemented her status as a fashion icon. Designers and artists didn't just admire her, they collaborated with her, drawing inspiration from her fearless persona. The iconic persona of Debbie Harry. Debbie Harry wasn't just a star, she was a cultural force. Every detail of her image was deliberate and unforgettable, from her razor-sharp platinum bob to her fearless fashion choices. Debbie embodied a duality, rebellious yet glamorous, edgy yet accessible, that set her apart from anyone else in the music world. Fashion became an integral part of her identity. Debbie had a natural eye for style, mixing thrift store finds with pieces by cutting-edge designers like Vivienne Westwood, Steven Sprouse, and Thierry Mugler. She balanced punk's rough edges with high fashion's polish, effortlessly creating looks that became iconic. Her influence was undeniable. Madonna, Gwen Stefani, and later Lady Gaga all cited her as a major inspiration. Designers weren't just dressing Debbie, they were using her as a muse, a walking canvas for the intersection of art, music, and fashion. Her impact wasn't limited to music and style. Debbie began branching into acting, starting with her role in Union City, 1980. Though it was a small independent film, it showcased her edgy charisma. She followed it with a role in David Cronenberg's Videodrome, 1983, where her cool detachment and haunting screen presence made her a standout. These roles proved she was more than a singer. She was a multi-dimensional artist. Debbie also broke ground as a feminist icon. In interviews, she openly discussed the challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated industry. Rather than shy away from the novelty of her position, she embraced it, using her platform to push boundaries. "Being a woman in a band was a novelty back then," she once said. "I liked that it made me stand out. Her sharp wit and unapologetic attitude resonated with a generation of women looking for role models who defied convention. Blondie's collapse through struggles. By the early 1980s, Blondie was reaching its breaking point. Years of relentless touring, recording, and navigating the pressures of global fame had taken their toll. The cracks in the band's foundation, creative tensions, financial mismanagement, and personal struggles became too deep to ignore. Creative differences were at the heart of the discord. Chris Stein, a driving force behind Blondie's sound, was eager to experiment with avant-garde styles, while other band members wanted to return to their punk roots. Debbie Harry, the face of Blondie's success, was caught between the divergent artistic visions. At the same time, the pressure to satisfy a growing fan base and maintain their commercial success was overwhelming. Financial troubles compounded the strain. Despite chart-topping hits, Blondie faced accusations of mismanagement that left the band in precarious financial standing. Poor decisions by their management team and disputes over royalties created internal friction. Chris and Debbie, who co-owned many of the band's assets, were hit particularly hard, with mounting debts and legal battles draining their resources. Chrysalis Records demanded additional albums despite the band's unraveling, further complicating the situation. Personal challenges only deepened the crisis. In 1982, Chris Stein was diagnosed with pemphigus, a rare autoimmune disease that left him unable to perform. Debbie took on the role of caregiver, adding emotional and physical strain to an already difficult time. Medical bills and the need to sustain their household forced the couple to sell significant assets, a harsh contrast to their earlier years of success. Debbie Harry's solo career. After Blondie's breakup, Debbie Harry faced the challenge of building a solo career. Her name carried weight, but stepping out of Blondie's shadow was harder than expected. In 1981, she released her first solo album, Cuckoo, produced by Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards of Chic. The record blended funk, pop, and new wave, marking a clear departure from Blondie's genre-hopping sound. The album's artwork, designed by Swiss artist H.R. Giger, turned heads. Giger's signature biomechanical style showed Debbie's face pierced with metallic rods. The bold imagery challenged beauty standards and mirrored the experimental tone of the album. While critics praised the visuals, the music received mixed reviews. Tracks like Backfired didn't connect with U.S. audiences, and the album struggled to gain traction. In Europe, it performed modestly, but it couldn't compete with Blondie's previous hits. Cuckoo highlighted the challenges of stepping away from Blondie's legacy. Fans and industry executives alike found it difficult to separate Debbie from the band's identity. Blondie's music had always been a collaborative effort, and Cuckoo often felt like an extension of that dynamic rather than a reinvention. Debbie herself later admitted that the transition to solo work was more difficult than she had anticipated. Despite the setbacks, she refused to fade away. Debbie began collaborating with artists across different genres, including Iggy Pop and the avant-garde jazz group The Jazz Passengers. These projects allowed her to explore new creative avenues, though they didn't bring mainstream success. Her willingness to experiment showed a side of her that valued artistry over commercial appeal. By the late 1980s, Debbie shifted her focus to acting. Her standout role as Velma Von Tussle in John Waters' Hairspray, 1988, let her showcase her edgy charisma. The film's campy tone suited Debbie perfectly, and the role brought her positive attention. Acting kept her in the public eye, even as her music career struggled to regain momentum. Caregiving and a career pause. The late 1980s marked one of the most grueling and transformative periods in Debbie Harry's life. Chris Stein's condition left him incapacitated due to his autoimmune disease. He was unable to tour or record and was in need of round-the-clock care. Debbie, faced with mounting challenges, stepped away from her career at a critical time to serve as his primary caregiver. This was not just a test of resilience, but also a lesson in sacrifice. Debbie's vibrant world of music, performance, and fame was replaced by hospital visits, medical consultations, and the relentless demands of caregiving. She later described the experience as isolating, marked by physical and emotional exhaustion. The once glamorous couple who had dominated the music scene now faced the stark realities of survival. Their financial situation became dire. Blondie's disbandment had left them without the steady income from touring and royalties, while mounting medical bills loomed large. To sustain them, Debbie sold their Manhattan loft and other cherished assets, a stark reminder of how far they had fallen from their former success. Despite these hardships, Debbie's loyalty to Chris remained unshakable. Their bond, though no longer romantic, was rooted in shared history and mutual respect. This period revealed the depths of her devotion, highlighting a side of her often overshadowed by her bold public persona. Even during this turbulent time, Debbie found ways to nurture her creative spirit. She sporadically collaborated with independent artists, wrote music, and took on small film roles. These projects allowed her to maintain a connection to her art, even if her presence in the spotlight diminished. For the first time since Blondie's meteoric rise, it seemed as though Debbie's era had ended. Yet, the hiatus profoundly shaped her. Debbie later reflected on this period as one that redefined her perspective, forcing her to confront the fragility of fame and the importance of personal connections. When Chris's health began to stabilize in the early 1990s, it signaled the end of a difficult chapter and the start of a new one. Blondie's revival in the 1990s and 2000s. Blondie's unexpected reunion in 1997 was a moment fans had been waiting for, and one that critics didn't see coming. After more than a decade of silence, the band reassembled with a mix of original members, Debbie Harry, Chris Stein, and drummer Clem Burke, and new additions to fill the gaps. The timing was perfect. Nostalgia for the punk and new wave era was thriving, and Blondie's fingerprints were all over modern pop, punk, and alternative music. Their return was a chance to reclaim their legacy. In 1999, Blondie released their comeback album, No Exit. The record marked a fresh start, blending their classic sound with contemporary influences. The standout track, Maria, became an instant hit, reaching #1 in the UK and earning Blondie a spot back on the charts. It was a triumphant moment, proof that Blondie could still captivate a new generation. No Exit sold over 2 million copies worldwide, and the band embarked on a sold-out world tour that brought their music to old and new fans alike. Debbie Harry, now in her 50s, was a revelation on stage. Critics praised her commanding presence, noting that her charisma hadn't faded with time. Rolling Stone captured her sentiment perfectly when she said, "We've come full circle. It's great to be back." After No Exit, Blondie kept making music through the 2000s. Albums like The Curse of Blondie, 2003, and Panic of Girls, 2011, didn't match their earlier chart success. Still, they proved the band wasn't afraid to try new things. Songs from these records showed their drive to experiment, even as they faded from mainstream radio. During this time, Debbie stayed busy outside of music. She took on acting roles in indie films and appeared in TV shows. These projects kept her in the spotlight and reinforced her reputation as a cultural icon. While their new music didn't dominate, Blondie's willingness to evolve kept their story alive. The reunion wasn't without its difficulties. Old tensions with former bandmates resurfaced, and not all critics embraced Blondie's later projects. Some questioned whether the band's new material lived up to their groundbreaking past. For Debbie, however, the reunion was about more than topping charts. It was a declaration that Blondie was not just a nostalgic act, but a band still willing to grow and take risks. The decline of influence and legacy missteps. By the 2010s, Blondie had settled into a new phase of their career, one defined more by nostalgia than innovation. While the band continued to release new music, their albums struggled to make a significant commercial or cultural impact. Records like Ghosts of Download, 2014, and Pollinator, 2017, showcased their willingness to collaborate with contemporary artists, but they fell short of recapturing the groundbreaking energy that had defined their earlier work. For some fans, Blondie's adherence to their signature sound felt stagnant, a missed opportunity to evolve alongside the changing music landscape. Debbie Harry, however, remained a cultural icon. Even as Blondie's new projects failed to chart, her enduring influence was unmistakable. She continued to tour, bringing Blondie's classic hits to devoted fans worldwide. Her stage presence still radiated charisma, but her role in the industry had shifted. Debbie was now celebrated more as a legacy act, her contributions to music and fashion referenced by a new generation of artists. Stars like Lady Gaga and Charli XCX openly cited her as an influence, drawing on her fearless style and genre-defying approach to music. Critics often noted that her legacy loomed larger in the work of others than in her own contemporary projects. Despite this, Debbie's connection with her fanbase remained strong. In 2019, she released her memoir, Face It, a candid and unfiltered account of her life. The book delved into Blondie's meteoric rise, the challenges of fame, her personal struggles, and her experiences as a trailblazing woman in the music industry. Fans and critics alike praised the memoir for its wit, honesty, and Debbie's refusal to sugarcoat the highs and lows of her journey. Face It was a reminder of the depth and complexity behind the iconic image. For over 4 decades, Debbie Harry had navigated the highs and lows of the industry with an authenticity that kept her relevant, even as the spotlight dimmed.